My name is Marianne Lockridge. I'm 49 years old, and I'm about to tell you a story about the night I finally let someone see what I've been hiding for 30 years. But first, you need to understand where I come from. Coldwater Ridge, Ohio, population 3,847. The kind of town where people don't gossip about your mistakes. They wait until those mistakes destroy you completely, then they gossip. Every bankruptcy, every foreclosure, every marriage that crumbles under the weight of bills no one saw coming. It all becomes dinner conversation before the body's even cold. I grew up watching money kill love, slowly, methodically, like poison in a well. My father, Dennis Lockridge, was a compulsive provider. That's what my mother called it anyway. I called it something else. Desperation. He worked 3 jobs: hardware store manager by day, security guard 4 nights a week, weekend landscaping when the season allowed. He wanted to give us everything. Private piano lessons for Elaine, dance classes for me, a house with a finished basement, family vacations we took exactly once. He died at 52. Heart attack in the parking lot of the hardware store, still wearing his name tag. The funeral was on a Tuesday. By Friday, we'd learned the truth. He'd left us nothing. Less than nothing. Credit card debt that had been hidden in statements he burned in the backyard every month. A second mortgage my mother didn't know existed. Medical bills from a condition he never told anyone about because treatment cost too much. The man worked himself to death trying to provide for us, and all he left behind was a hole. We spent 5 years climbing out of my mother. Sheila remarried fast. Gerald Trumbull, a man who sold RVs and made promises that sounded solid until you realized they were built on the same foundation as the vehicles he peddled. Good for the short term, catastrophic over distance. She lost him slower. He didn't die. He just took piece by piece. The house, the savings, her pride. By the time she finally left him, she was 56 and working checkout at a grocery store, scanning items she used to be able to afford. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about growing up like that. You start looking for patterns, warnings, the fine print in every relationship. My grandfather, Arthur Lockridge, was an accountant, respected, reliable until he disappeared for 2 years without a single word of explanation. No note, no phone call, just ... gone. When he came back, he never told anyone where he'd been. My grandmother, Beatrice, never asked. Or maybe she did and he never answered. Either way, the silence sat between them like a third person at every meal for the rest of their lives. Beatrice died when I was 17. 3 days before the funeral, I watched her burn documents in a metal drum in the backyard. Bank statements, legal papers, letters I couldn't read from where I stood. She looked up, saw me watching, and said only one thing. Some truths are kindest when they're ashes. I never found out what those papers said, but I learned the lesson anyway. Then there was my sister, Elaine. Beautiful, charming Elaine, who married a man named Victor Hastings. Old money, generational wealth, the kind of family that had a crest and used it on her. She thought she'd escaped. Thought love and a 7-figure prenup meant safety. The divorce took 3 years. When it was over, she had nothing. Not because she didn't deserve anything, because she'd trusted the wrong lawyer, signed the wrong papers, believed the wrong promises. Victor's family had attorneys who treated marriage like a business acquisition and divorce like hostile takeover defense. She walked away with a settlement that looked generous in writing and dissolved like sugar and water once the taxes and fees were done, last I heard. Elaine was living in a studio apartment in Tampa, working as a medical transcription, IST. So yes, I learned very young what money does to love. It exposes it, tests it, twists it until you can't tell the difference between affection and transaction. Between partnership and parasitism, I learned one rule, and I learned it bone deep. The way you learn not to touch a hot stove, if someone truly loves you, they'll survive not knowing your safety net. I built my life around that rule. Worked my way through college, waiting tables and cleaning houses, got a job in pharmaceutical sales, then medical device consulting, then private healthcare contracting. I was good at it. Better than good. I understood what people needed before they knew they needed it, and I made sure they paid appropriately for the solution. I saved quietly, carefully, the way my grandmother burned papers methodically. With purpose, leaving no trace. I never talked about money. Not with friends. Not with colleagues. Not with the few men I dated over the years. I lived comfortably, but not ostentatiously. A nice apartment, not a showcase. A reliable car, not a statement. Vacations that were memorable, not Instagram dash-worthy. And I never planned to marry again. The first marriage was enough. A mistake made at 23 with a man who loved the idea of me more than the reality, and who resented both by It ended quietly, the way most things end, not with drama, but with the slow recognition that you've been alone together for longer than you were ever actually together. I told myself I was done, That I'd be the aunt with the interesting career, and the tidy savings, and the freedom to answer to no one. Then I met a man named Richard Voss. Charming, attentive, 51 years old with salt and pepper hair and a consulting business he described as steady. He asked me to dinner, then to a gallery opening, then to meet his daughter Clara, a sweet 22-year-old studying architecture, and slowly, carefully, against every rule I'd built my life around, I let him in. Not all the way. Never all the way, but far enough that 18 months later when he asked me to marry him, I said yes. And far enough that 3 nights ago, when he looked at me across the table and said, "Marianne, I just don't think you contribute enough to this relationship," I realized. I'd been waiting 30 years for someone to say exactly that, because here's what Richard Voss didn't know. He kept asking what I brought to the table without ever realizing I built the table, bought the house it sits in, and was deciding whether he deserved a chair. I need you to understand something about Richard. No, wait. I haven't told you the truth yet, have I? His name isn't Richard Voss, it's Trent Holloway. And I lied to you in Act 1 because that's what you do when you're protecting something. You misdirect. You offer a version of the truth that feels complete enough that no one looks closer. Trent Holloway, financial strategist, 51 years old with the kind of face that photographs well at charity. Fundraisers, symmetrical, trustworthy. Forgettable until you realize you've been looking at it for 20 minutes and still can't decide if he's smiling. I met him through my neighbor, Calvin Moore, 73-year-old retired corrections officer, who spent 30 years watching men lie about everything from contraband cigarettes to murder weapons. Calvin trusted exactly for people on Earth, and I was one of them. When he introduced me to Trent at a community garden fundraiser, he said, "This one's different, Marianne." Got his head on straight. No red flags I can see. Coming from Calvin, that was a marriage license and a benediction combined. Trent was polite, immaculate. The kind of man who wore pressed khakis to a backyard barbecue and made it look appropriate instead of uptight. He listened when you spoke, made eye contact, remembered details, your mother's first name, the restaurant you mentioned wanting to try, the fact that you preferred tea to coffee but only in the afternoon. He worked as a financial strategist for mid-sized corporations going through restructuring. He'd come in, analyze their debt, their assets, their personnel costs, and tell them precisely where to cut and where to cauterize. It was brutal work, but he never framed it that way. He called it optimization. He called it sustainability. Consulting. He was good at making necessary cruelty sound like compassion. We dated for 4 months before he asked me what I did for work for months. Most men ask on the first date. They want to calculate your value, assess your ambition, figure out if you're worth the investment of a second dinner. But Trent waited, and when he finally asked, it was casual over Sunday brunch. Tucked between a comment about the weather and a question about my sister. "You've never really told me what you do, Marianne." I realize I've been rude not to ask. I told him the truth. I'm a historical records contractor. I work with law firms, insurance companies, and occasionally private investigators to locate, verify, and analyze historical documents, property deeds, birth certificates, financial records from estate disputes. It's detail-oriented work. Low visibility, flexible income. He nodded, smiled, said, "That sounds fascinating." And then he never asked about it again. But I started noticing things, the way he'd glance at my mail when I brought it in from the box. Not obviously, just a flicker of his eyes across the return addresses before I set the stack on the counter. The way he'd pause when I mentioned picking up a client project. "Oh, what's this one about?" Always interested. Never pushy, just ... cataloging. The way he remembered numbers. I mentioned once casually that I'd bought my car in 2019. 3 months later, he asked if I'd considered trading it in. "You've had it about 5 years now, right? Might be time before the mileage impacts resale value." He remembered the year. I'd said it once, in passing. Then I met his mother, Lydia Holloway, 76 years old, silver hair and a chignon that looked like it had been pinned by a bank manager in 1952. She lived in a pristine colonial in a gated community where even the mailboxes looked like they'd been audited for compliance. She served tea in porcelain cups that cost more than my monthly car payment and asked me questions that sounded polite until you realized they were invasive. "And you've never remarried, dear? After your first marriage ended, you work from home primarily? How lovely. Such flexibility." Trent mentioned, "You're very private. I suppose that comes from your work." Every statement was a probe. Every smile was an assessment. At one point, she leaned forward and patted my hand. "Love is something you earn, Marianne. It's not just given. I've always taught my son that partnership requires proof. Proof. Like love was a ledger that needed balancing." Then there was Uncle Frank Holloway, the family accountant, Though I'm fairly certain his credentials were more familial than professional, he showed up at Trent's place one evening, unannounced, ostensibly to drop off some documents. But he stayed, asked questions, friendly questions, casual questions. So Marianne, you own or rent? Ever think about investing in property? Market's fascinating right now. Trent mentioned you do contract work, must be feast or famine, huh? Or do you have something steadier on the side? I smiled, deflected, gave answers that sounded complete but revealed nothing. And I watched Frank's eyes narrow just slightly, not with suspicion. With curiosity, the kind you have when the numbers don't add up but you can't figure out which column is wrong. My friends noticed too. Yvonne Price, divorce mediator. Seen 100 marriages implode? Can smell a prenup violation from 3 counties away. Pulled me aside at a dinner party. Marianne, that man is itemizing you. I've seen this before. He's not asking for money because he doesn't need to. He's counting. If you've ever felt measured instead of loved, let me know in the comments. And subscribe, because what happens next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about trust. I laughed it off. Told her she'd been in family court too long, but then Hannah Greer said something similar. Hannah, who teaches Sunday school and believes the best about everyone, who once defended a church treasurer caught embezzling because maybe he was just confused about the accounts. Even Hannah said, there's something transactional about Trent. Marianne, like he's always calculating the exchange rate. And still, I stayed. Because here's the thing. Trent never asked for money, never even hinted at financial trouble. His business was successful. He had a nice house, not extravagant, but comfortable. He paid for dinners without fanfare, split costs on vacations without complaint. He didn't want my money, but he counted everything: the number of times I mentioned travel, the frequency of my client meetings, the car I drove, the neighborhood I lived in, the watch I wore that was nice but not too nice. He was building a profile, creating a financial sketch of me, the way an artist builds a portrait, one careful stroke at a time. And one night, lying in bed after he'd fallen asleep, I realized what was happening. Trent wasn't worried that I was broke. He was worried that I was unverifiable. He couldn't figure me out. The numbers didn't align with the lifestyle. I lived comfortably but not lavishly. I worked regularly but not desperately. I had no debt he could detect, no windfalls he could trace, no family money he could account for. I was a financial blank space. And for a man like Trent Holloway, a man who made his living finding hidden problems in balance sheets, who believed every number told a story if you just asked the right questions, a blank space wasn't mysterious. It was threatening. So he did what any good financial strategist would do. He started testing me, small comments, gentle probes. You know, Marianne, I've been thinking about our future. When we're married, it would make sense to consolidate some things, simplify our finances. Or, I was talking to Uncle Frank, he mentioned it's smart for couples to be transparent about assets before marriage. Just makes everything cleaner. Or, my personal favorite, delivered with that soft, reasonable smile, I just want to make sure we're building something together, you know, that we're both ... equally invested. Equally invested, as if love was a portfolio. That required matching contributions. I smiled, nodded, said all the right things. And I started preparing for the night I knew was coming. The night Trent Holloway would finally stop asking politely ... and start demanding proof. It started with a game. That's what Trent called it. Anyway, a financial transparency exercise. He brought it up over dinner: homemade pasta, a bottle of wine he'd selected because he remembered I mentioned liking Pinot Noir 6 weeks earlier. Always so thoughtful, always so deliberate. I was reading this article, he said, twirling linguine around his fork with the precision of a man who'd never made a mess in his life, about couples who do financial check-ins before marriage, not because there's a problem, but because it builds trust, prevents surprises down the road. He smiled, warm, open, reasonable. I thought we could try it. Just talk through our financial histories, where we've been, where we want to go, make sure we're aligned. Where we've been, I set down my wine glass carefully. What kind of history are we talking about? Oh, nothing invasive. He laughed, that gentle, self-deprecating sound that made you feel paranoid for questioning him. Just the basics. Childhood money lessons. Any inheritances or trusts, how we each approach savings and debt, the stuff that shapes how we think about money, I told him it sounded interesting. I told him we could talk about it sometime, and then I started paying attention. 3 days later, he asked about my childhood, specifically about assets. We were driving back from his daughter Clara's apartment. She'd invited us for brunch, and the whole morning had been pleasant, easy. The kind of thing that made me think maybe I was being paranoid about the little probes, the gentle questions. Then, on the highway, Trent said, "Your father worked multiple jobs, right? Did he have life insurance? Any pension from the hardware store?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, nothing like that. He gazed out the window. That must have been hard on your mother. Did your grandparents help out financially? I know you mentioned your grandfather was an accountant. He was also gone for 2 years, I said. And when he came back, he wasn't exactly flush with family bailout money, right? That disappearance you mentioned? Trent nodded slowly, like he was filing this away. Did he ever explain where he'd been? Sometimes people leave because of financial trouble. Gambling debts, business failures. He let it hang there. An invitation to fill in the blank? I didn't, but he'd planted the question. And over the next 2 weeks, he kept planting more. Did my sister get anything in her divorce settlement that she might have shared with family? Had my mother's second husband left her anything when they split? Had there been any family property sold that I might have received a portion of? Every question was casual, sympathetic even. Framed as concern or curiosity, never accusation. But they were questions an auditor asks. Questions designed to map hidden assets and undisclosed income streams. Then the prenup came up. We were at his place, watching a movie neither of us was really paying attention to when he said, I've been thinking, when we get married, we should probably do a prenup. I kept my eyes on the screen. Oh, not because I don't trust you. He reached over, squeezed my hand, but because we're both coming into this later in life. We've both built things independently. It just makes sense to protect what we've each worked for. Keep things clean. Clean, that word again. Plus, he continued, it forces both people to be honest about what they have. No surprises. No resentment. Just ... transparency. I told him that sounded reasonable. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already noticed. My mail had been opened. It was subtle. A small tear along the seal of an envelope from my bank, the kind of tear that could happen in transit. Except I'd seen the mail carrier deliver it intact through the window. I'd watched Trent bring it in from the mailbox 20 minutes later. And when I opened it that evening, the fold was wrong. Just slightly. The way paper sits when it's been opened and refolded by someone trying to be careful. I didn't say anything. I just started watching. 2 weeks after that, I got a credit report alert. Someone had requested my credit report. The notification didn't say who, just that an inquiry had been made for employment or tenant screening purposes. Except I wasn't applying for jobs or apartments. I hadn't authorized anything. I called the credit bureau. They couldn't tell me who'd requested it without a formal investigation. They asked if I wanted to file a fraud report. I said no, but I knew then my brother Peter called. Peter Lockridge, 46 years old, lives in Austin, works in supply chain logistics, and hasn't called me without a reason since 2019 when our mother had her hip surgery. We're not estranged, we're just not close. Different lives, different orbits. Hey Marianne, weird question. Do you know a guy named Trent Holloway? My stomach dropped. Why? He reached out to me on LinkedIn. Said he was your fiancé. Congratulations, by the way. Didn't know you were engaged and that he wanted to talk about family planning. Said he was trying to understand both sides of the family before the wedding. Asked if we could grab coffee next time he's in Austin. I closed my eyes. What did you tell him? I told him I'd think about it. But Marianne, it was weird. He asked about Dad, about whether there was any family money we didn't talk about. Said he wanted to make sure you weren't carrying any burdens alone. Like he was being supportive. But it felt ... off. It felt off because it was off, because Trent wasn't being supportive. He was triangulating, but the call that confirmed everything came from Edgar Bloom. Edgar Bloom, 81 years old, been practicing estate law since Nixon was president, represented my grandmother Beatrice before she died. I hadn't spoken to him in probably 15 years, not since we'd closed out Beatrice's estate, such as it was. His voice was reedy but sharp when he called. Marianne, I received an unusual request yesterday. Someone claiming to be your attorney asked for copies of any trust documents or estate planning materials associated with your grandmother's estate. Said you'd authorized the release for premarital financial planning. My throat went dry. I didn't authorize anything. I didn't think so. That's why I'm calling. The request came from a firm I didn't recognize. I told them I'd need direct authorization from you before releasing anything. He paused. Is everything all right, dear? Everything's fine, Edgar. Thank you for checking. But everything was not fine, because Trent Holloway wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was conducting an investigation, pulling threads, contacting family members and attorneys and credit bureaus, trying to construct a financial profile of me from the outside in, since I wouldn't give him access from the inside out. When I confronted him, he smiled. We were at dinner. Always at dinner? Always over something pleasant and civilized in, I said, very calmly. Why did you contact my brother? He didn't even flinch. Oh, that? I wanted to get to know your family better. Peter seems great. We had a good conversation, and my grandmother's attorney. Now he looked confused. Beautifully. convincingly confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone requested trust documents from my grandmother's estate. Using my name? That's terrible. His brow furrowed with concern. Identity theft, maybe? You should report that. I can help you. I know people who specialize in this kind of fraud. I'm sure you do, I thought. But I smiled, nodded, let him think I believed him, and the credit report inquiry. Marianne. He reached across the table, took my hand. His palm was warm, steady. I think you're stressed. Wedding planning can do that. But I promise you, I'm not investigating you. I'm trying to marry you. There's a difference. He said it so sincerely, so kindly. And that's when I understood this wasn't about money. This was about access. Trent didn't need my bank account. He had his own. He didn't need me to pay his bills or fund his lifestyle. He was perfectly solvent. What he needed was control. He needed to know every piece of me. Every asset, every account, every corner of my financial life mapped and documented and understood. Because for a man like Trent Holloway, a man who built his career on finding hidden problems, on exposing what companies tried to hide, uncertainty was intolerable. I was a balance sheet that didn't balance, a spreadsheet with cells he couldn't access. And he would keep digging, keep probing, keep smiling his reasonable smile while he dismantled my privacy piece by piece, until he either found what he was looking for, or convinced himself there was nothing to find. But here's what Trent didn't understand. I'd been preparing for this my entire life. Every financial move I'd made since I was 25 years old had been designed to be invisible, not illegal, not hidden through fraud or deception, just ... unverifiable. And now, finally, I was going to show him exactly what he'd been looking for. Not because he deserved to know, but because I wanted him to understand what he'd lost the moment he started treating our engagement like a forensic audit. The engagement dinner was Trent's idea. He presented it as a celebration and intimate gathering at his house to toast our upcoming marriage with the people who mattered most. 20 guests, catered meal, string lights in the backyard, the kind of event that looks effortless but requires a 3-page planning document and a timeline coordinated to the minute. Trent was excellent at things that looked effortless. The guest list was carefully curated. His mother, Lydia, of course, holding court in a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's wedding dresses. Uncle Frank, nursing a scotch and scanning the room like he was calculating the net worth of the glassware. Calvin Moore, my neighbor, looking vaguely uncomfortable in a button-down shirt, but present because he'd introduced us and felt some kind of proprietary responsibility for the outcome. Yvonne was there. I'd made sure of that. I needed at least one person in the room who would see what was about to happen and understand it for what it was. And then there was Miles Keaton, Trent's colleague, mid-40s, boutique financial consulting firm, the kind of man who said synergy unironically and believed disruption was a personality trait. He and Trent had worked on multiple corporate restructuring projects together. They spoke the same language, the language of optimization, efficiency, measurable outcomes, the language of cutting things that didn't produce returns. Dinner was perfect. Of course it was. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables arranged like they were auditioning for a culinary magazine, wine that Trent described with words like notes and finish, while everyone nodded as if they could taste the difference. I smiled. I laughed at appropriate moments. I complimented the meal and I waited, because I knew Trent. I knew that this dinner wasn't just a celebration, it was a stage. And at some point during the evening, he was going to use it for what he'd been building toward for months. Validation. It happened during dessert. We were on the back patio that perfect early evening light that makes everything look like a memory you haven't made yet. Someone had asked Trent about wedding planning, and he'd deflected with his usual charm. Oh, Marianne's handling most of it. She's much better at those details than I am. Generous, complimentary. The kind of statement that sounds like partnership then. Miles Keaton, with that grin that men get when they think they're being playfully provocative, said, "So, Trent, you finally found someone who can keep up with you financially. Must be nice to have a partner who pulls equal weight." The table went quiet for just a second. That particular kind of silence where everyone's suddenly interested but pretending not to be. Trent laughed, not nervously, confidently. "Well, that's an interesting question, Miles." He looked at me, smiled. That warm, affectionate smile that had fooled me for 18 months. Marianne contributes stability, not capital. 6 words. Delivered like a toast. I felt every eye at the table shift toward me. Some with curiosity, some with pity, Yvonne's with sharp, immediate anger. But I didn't react. I just took a sip of wine and waited. Uncle Frank jumped in, nodding sagely. "That's wise, Trent. Every partnership needs different kinds of investment. Emotional labor is labor too." He said it like he was defending me, like he was being magnanimous, like I needed defending Lydia. set down her dessert fork with the delicacy of someone placing a period at the end of a sentence. Love grows with fairness. I've always believed that. When both people contribute proportionally to their capacity, that's when trust deepens, proportionally to their capacity, as if she'd already determined mine. Trent was warming up now. I could see it the way he leaned forward slightly. The way his voice took on that consultative tone he used when explaining difficult concepts to clients who needed things simplified. The truth is, he said, addressing the table but performing for me. We live in a world where financial literacy is essential, and part of being a strong couple is being transparent about resources. Not in a transactional way, he held up a hand as if someone had objected, though no one had, but in a protective way. He turned to me fully now, still smiling. Still kind. We can't protect what we don't measure. There it was. The thesis statement. The closing argument. The thing he'd been building toward through months of gentle questions, careful observations, strategic probes into my family and my history, and my credit report. We can't protect what we don't measure, which really meant I can't control what I can't see. Miles nodded enthusiastically. That's smart, man. Especially with everything happening in the economy right now, you've got to have visibility into the whole picture. Exactly, Trent said, and Marianne understands that. She's a private person, which I respect, but partnership requires some level of disclosure, doesn't it, sweetheart? Sweetheart. He was asking me to agree, to nod, to confirm in front of all these witnesses that yes, he was right. Partnership required disclosure, and I had been withholding and now chastened and exposed. I would finally be reasonable. This was supposed to be the moment I broke. The moment I got defensive or emotional or apologetic. The moment I either confessed that yes, I'd been hiding something, or proved that I had nothing to hide by offering up my financial life for his inspection. Either way, he won. I set down my wine glass carefully. The way you set down something fragile when you want people to notice how controlled you're being, you're absolutely right. Trent, I said. His smile widened, relief and triumph mixing in his eyes. Partnership does require transparency. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, which is why I think it's time we had a real conversation. Just not here, not now. I stood smoothly, calmly. Thank you all for coming. This has been a lovely evening. Trent, could we talk inside for a moment? I didn't wait for an answer. I walked back into the house, through the kitchen with its gleaming countertops and appliances that looked like they'd been designed by aerospace engineers, and into the study where Trent kept his files and his laptop and his framed certifications that proved he was qualified to dismantle companies for a living. I heard him behind me, his footsteps, the door closing. Marianne, I didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset, and I wasn't. That was the strange part. That was what I saw click into place as I stood there in his study, surrounded by his books on financial strategy and corporate optimization and the art of negotiation. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was done. Done pretending that his questions were reasonable. Done pretending that his investigations were concerned. Done pretending that this relationship was about love instead of what it had always been. A merger he was trying to negotiate with incomplete information. You want transparency? I said. You want to measure what we're both bringing to this partnership? He looked relieved. Like I was finally being rational. Yes, exactly. That's all I've been asking for. Marianne, just honesty. Just then, tomorrow night, I interrupted. We'll have dinner. Just us. And I'll show you exactly what I contribute. He blinked, surprise flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. Okay, that sounds good. I appreciate, but Trent, I met his eyes, held them. When I show you, you don't get to ask any more questions. You don't get to investigate. You don't get to contact my family or my attorneys or pull my credit report again. Yes, I know about that. When I show you what I've built, that's it. You either accept it, and me, and the fact that I kept it private for 30 years for reasons you're about to understand, or you don't, and we're done. The relief was gone from his face now. Something else was sliding in. Uncertainty? Maybe. Or the first edge of fear, because this wasn't how this was supposed to go. He thought this dinner was the moment I'd confess weakness instead. It was the moment I stopped pretending. I walked past him, back toward the patio where our guests were pretending not to have noticed that something significant had just happened, and I smiled. Because tomorrow night, Trent Holloway was finally going to get exactly what he'd been asking for. He was going to see the whole picture, and it was going to be the last thing he ever expected. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was nervous, not because I was rehearsing what I'd say, but because the moment I'd committed to showing Trent the account, I had to go back to a place I'd spent 30 years trying to leave behind. The night my grandmother Beatrice died, I was 17 years old, 3 days before her funeral. I found her in the backyard burning papers in that metal drum. I told you that already. What I didn't tell you was what she said after she looked up and saw me watching. After she delivered that line about some truths being kindest when they're ashes, she beckoned me closer. The smoke was acrid, chemical, not just paper burning. Photographs, maybe. Plastic document sleeves, things that weren't meant to burn but were burning anyway because she'd made a choice that couldn't be unmade. Your grandfather, she said, not looking at me, watching the flames instead, was not the man people thought he was. I didn't say anything. At 17, you learn that silence is sometimes the only safe response. They accused him of embezzlement from the firm where he worked. $340,000 over 6 years. They had documentation, transfers, signatures. Her voice was flat, factual, the way you recite something you've memorized because emotional inflection would make it unbearable. He disappeared for 2 years because he was fighting it. Not running from it, fighting it. He hired attorneys, forensic accountants, spent every penny we had trying to prove the signatures were forged, the transfers were manipulated. The documentation was fabricated by his business partner, man named Gerald Wickham, who needed a scapegoat when his own gambling debts came due. She paused, fed another document to the flames. He won, eventually. 2 years later, he won. The court cleared him. The firm settled not because they admitted wrongdoing, but because it was cheaper than continuing to litigate. They paid him $380,000 for damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. Made him sign an NDA, made the whole thing disappear from public record. I remember asking then, why did he never talk about it? Beatrice finally looked at me. Her eyes were dry, hard, the eyes of someone who'd learned that vindication doesn't heal anything, it just stops the bleeding. Because vindication doesn't give you back what you lose, Marianne. It doesn't give you back the friends who believed the accusations, the clients who left, the 2 years of your life spent proving you're not a criminal. Your husband came home, cleared of all charges, and do you know what happened? I shook my head. Nothing. People nodded, said that's good. And then they never mentioned it again, because they were embarrassed they'd believed it, or because they didn't actually care whether he was innocent. They only cared that he'd been accused. The stain doesn't wash out just because you prove it with someone else's blood. She turned back to the fire. The settlement money sat in an account for 8 years. We never touched it, because every time we thought about using it buying something, traveling, helping your mother when your father died, it felt like using blood money. Like admitting that 2 years of hell was worth $380,000, that you could put a price on your husband's name? What happened to it? I asked. I'm putting it in your name, she said. After I die, split between you and Elaine, not because I want you to have it, but because if I die with it still sitting there, your grandfather's partner will come looking for it. There are people who remember, people who'll tell themselves the settlement proved Arthur was guilty, not innocent, that he hid money somewhere. She looked at me again, and this time her expression was different. Almost pleading, so I'm giving it to you. And I'm teaching you the only thing that kept me alive through all of this. Silence. You never tell anyone about money, Marianne. Not friends, not family, not husbands. Because the moment you do, it changes how they see you. It changes what they want from you. And you spend the rest of your life wondering if they love you or if they love what you represent. 3 days later, she died. 6 months after that, the account transferred to me and Elaine. $190,000 each. Legal, documented, taxed appropriately. Money we'd never asked for. Money tied to a nightmare we'd inherited secondhand. Elaine used hers as a down payment on the house she bought with Victor Hastings, the house she lost in the divorce, along with everything else, because Victor's attorneys argued that the down payment was a gift hand. Gifts could be considered shared marital property under the right legal interpretation. She called me after the settlement finalized. I remember she didn't cry. She just said you were smart not to touch yours. But I hadn't been smart. I'd been terrified because I'd watched what that money did to my sister. I'd watched Victor's entire demeanor change when she mentioned it casually. 6 months into their relationship, how his interest sharpened, how his questions became more frequent, how he started talking about our future and shared investments and all the things couples with combined resources could accomplish. I watched her fall in love with a man who was falling in love with her portfolio, so I left my half alone. Let it sit in that account, accruing interest so minimal it was almost insulting. I built my own career, made my own money, lived off what I earned, not what I'd inherited. And over the years, I invested it carefully, conservatively, no risks, no flash, just slow, steady growth in index funds and bonds, and the kind of boring financial instruments that don't make you rich but keep you stable. By the time I met Trent, that $190,000 had become $310,000, more than $250,000 that I'd never spent, never touched, never told anyone about, Not because I was ashamed of it, but because I'd learned the way my grandmother taught me that money doesn't reveal people's true character, it replaces it. The people who loved you start calculating. The people who resented you find justification. The people who are ambivalent suddenly have opinions about what you should do, where you should invest, how you should live, and the men. They either want to manage it or they want to compete with it. Or they want to dissolve into it, like they're entitled to rescue. I didn't hide the account to test Trent. I hid it to protect myself, because I'd seen what happened when you trusted someone with your financial reality. I'd seen my sister lose everything. I'd seen my grandmother burn papers rather than let people know what she'd survived. I'd seen my mother marry a man who saw her vulnerability as opportunity, and I'd promised myself I would never, ever let someone close enough to weaponize my safety net. But now, I was about to break that promise. Not because Trent had earned it. Not because I trusted him, but because after months of his investigations, his gentle interrogations, his strategic conversations with my family, and his credit checks and his dinner party performance, needed to know. I needed to see what he would do when he finally got what he'd been searching for. Would he be relieved? Vindicated? Would he apologize for doubting me? Or would he do what I suspected, what I'd spent 18 months quietly dreading, and reveal that this relationship had never been about love at all? That it had always been about inventory? The next evening, I went to his house. I brought my laptop. I brought account statements I'd printed that afternoon, 30 years of quarterly reports, investment summaries, tax documents. I brought the entire history of money I'd never asked for and never wanted, but had protected like my life depended on it, because maybe it did. Trent answered the door with that smile. The one that used to comfort me, now it just looked like a mask. Come in, I made dinner. Of course he did. Trent was always prepared. We ate, we made small talk. And then, finally, I opened my laptop. You wanted transparency, I said. Here it is. I turned the screen toward him, and I watched his face as he read the balance. 310 town, 2047-89. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared. Then his eyes flicked up to mine. This is yours? Yes, how long have you? 30 years. I watched confusion cross his face, then something else. Something I'd been expecting, but had hoped desperately, foolishly hoped I wouldn't see. Calculation. I didn't show him the account to prove my worth. I showed it to see his. And in the silence that followed, while Trent Holloway stared at proof of my financial stability and tried to recalibrate everything he thought he knew about me, I finally understood what my grandmother had been trying to tell me that night in the backyard. Some truths don't set you free. They just show you who was waiting to cage you all along. The number on the screen was 3011-24419. I watched Trent's eyes trace across it, once, twice, like he was verifying what he was seeing. Like the number might rearrange itself into something that made more sense with the version of me he'd constructed over 18 months. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10, 15. I counted them, the way you count the seconds between lightning and thunder to measure how close the storm is. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, not with relief, with something else, something I couldn't quite name yet. $300,000, he said, not a question, a confirmation, making it real by speaking it aloud. Give or take, I said. He nodded, still staring at the screen. Then he looked up at me, and his expression was so carefully neutral it was almost frightening. Why didn't you tell me? 4 words, delivered with perfect composure, no accusation in his voice, no hurt. Just genuine curiosity, as if I'd withheld information about preferring tea to coffee, not a 6-figure account I'd maintained for 3 decades. I prepared for a lot of reactions, anger, betrayal, defensive justifications about how he had a right to know. Even relief, some misguided gratitude that I was finally being honest with him. But this calm, measured curiosity, this felt more dangerous than any of those. Still, I'd prepared my answer. I practiced it in my head during the sleepless hours of the previous night. Because I needed to know who you'd be if I didn't, he blinked. Once, slowly, processing who I'd be, he repeated. Yes, you were, testing me, no. I kept my voice level, calm, matching his energy because I needed him to hear this clearly. I was protecting myself. There's a difference. Protecting yourself from what? Now there was something in his voice, not anger, something sharper. From marrying someone who wanted to understand your financial situation, from partnership, from exactly this, I interrupted. He stopped. His jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his composure. I gestured at the laptop, at the statements spread across his dining table, at the number still glowing on the screen between us. From the moment you see that number, everything changes. The way you look at me, the way you calculate our future, the questions you ask and the assumptions you make and the plans you start building without ever asking if I want to build them with you. That's not fair, Marianne, his voice was, still controlled, but I could hear the edge now. the defensiveness. I've been nothing but supportive. I've asked reasonable questions about our future together, about building a life. That's not you pulled my credit report. Silence. You contacted my brother, my grandmother's attorney. You opened my mail. I wasn't angry. I was just stating facts. You spent 6 months conducting a forensic investigation into my finances, Trent. Don't tell me this is about support. His face shifted, not with guilt, with something else. Something that looked almost like vindication. And now I understand why, he said quietly. My stomach tightened. He turned the laptop toward himself, started scrolling through the account history, the quarterly statements, the investment allocations. His eyes moved quickly, professionally, the way they probably moved when he audited companies for a living. This is substantial, he said. This changes things. Changes what things? Our planning. He looked up and his expression was earnest. Reasonable. The face of a man solving a problem. Marianne, this is wonderful. This gives us options we didn't have before. We can look at better properties. We can invest in opportunities I've been researching. We? I said softly. He paused. Yes, we're getting married. This is our future we're talking about. This account has been mine for 30 years, Trent. Mine alone. It existed long before you. It'll exist long after I stopped myself. But he caught it. His eyes sharpened. After what? I didn't answer. I just watched him. Watched the gears turning behind his eyes, and then he said the thing that made everything crystallize into perfect, terrible clarity. We need to restructure how you're investing this. Not, would you like to consider? Not, have you thought about? We need to. Your allocation is too conservative, he continued, warming to the subject now. Leaning forward, you're in mostly bonds and index funds safe, but you're losing potential returns. With my connections, I can get you into better vehicles, higher yield. We could potentially double this in 5 years if we're strategic. I don't want to double it, I said. He looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Why wouldn't you want to grow your assets? Because it's not about growth, Trent. It never was. Then what's it about? Survival. The word came out harder than I intended. This money exists because my grandfather spent 2 years of his life being accused of a crime he didn't commit. Because my grandmother chose silence over vindication. Because I watched my sister lose everything when she trusted someone with this exact information. This account isn't an opportunity. It's a scar. I watched his face. Watched him try to process this. Watched him fail because Trent Holloway didn't think in terms of scars. He thought in terms of assets and liabilities. Optimization and restructuring. Numbers that could be moved and leveraged and made to work harder. He thought the way men like him always think. That money is neutral. That it's just a tool. That its history doesn't matter. Only its potential. Marianne, he said, and his voice had that tone again. That gentle, patient tone he used when he thought I was being emotional instead of rational. I understand this has complicated history, but holding on to it unchanged out of fear isn't financial planning. It's paralysis. Paralysis. He'd just reduced 30 years of careful, deliberate choice to paralysis. And with both our resources combined, he continued, we could really build something. We could stop, I said. He stopped. I stood up, carefully. The way you stand when you know any sudden movement might shatter something you're not ready to have broken. Yet, this was never about building something together, was it? My voice was steady, calm. This was about you needing to know, needing to control, needing to optimize and restructure and measure. Because a partner you couldn't fully inventory was a problem that needed solving. That's not, you didn't fall in love with me, Trent. You fell in love with a mystery you thought you could solve. And now that you've seen the number, you're not relieved? You're not grateful I trusted you enough to show you. I met his eyes. You're already calculating how to manage it. I'm trying to help us, he said, and there was real frustration in his voice now. Real emotion breaking through the careful composure. I'm trying to build a future where we're both secure, where we're maximizing our potential. That's what partners do, Marianne. They plan together. They combine resources. They trust each other, I interrupted. And you've spent 6 months proving you don't trust me. That you never did. You trusted your investigations, your analysis, your ability to verify and quantify and measure, but you never trusted me. He stood now too. Because you were hiding this? Because you were lying by omission for 18 months? I was protecting myself, I said quietly. From becoming exactly what I'm watching happen right now? What's happening right now? You're not looking at me anymore. My voice broke just slightly, and I hated that it did. You're looking at an asset you need to manage. A resource you need to optimize. A problem you finally solved? That's not fair, isn't it? I closed the laptop. Started gathering the statements. In the 30 seconds after you saw that number, you made plans for it. Restructuring better investments. Higher yields. You didn't ask if I wanted that. You didn't ask what this money means to me. You just started calculating how you could make it work harder. He opened his mouth, closed it, and in that moment of silence, I saw something flicker across his face. Not guilt, not realization, recalculation. He was already adjusting his approach, already figuring out what to say to bring me back to the table. What argument to make, what angle to take, because that's what he did. That's who he was. A man who saw problems and solved them, who saw resistance and strategized around it, who saw a partner with $311,204.19 and immediately started planning how to leverage it into something bigger. I can't marry you. I said that the words came out calmly, definitively, like I'd practiced them, even though I hadn't. Even though I'd spent 18 months trying to convince myself this moment wouldn't come. Marianne, I can't marry someone who spent 6 months investigating me instead of knowing me, who pulled my credit report and contacted my family and looked at that number just now and thought we need to restructure this instead of, why did she carry this alone for 30 years? I was going to ask that, he said, and I almost believed him. You were calculating first. I finished. That's the problem, Trent. You always calculate first, and I need to be with someone who sees me first. I walked to the door, stopped, turned back. He was still standing by the table, still processing, still, I imagined, trying to figure out what he'd done wrong, what variable he'd miscalculated. For what it's worth, I said, the money was never the point. If you'd just loved me, if you'd just trusted me, I would have told you eventually, not because you demanded it, not because you investigated, but because that's what you do when you love someone. You share your scars when you're ready, when you know they won't use them against you. He didn't say anything. I opened the door. Marianne, he said finally, and his voice sounded different now, smaller. What happens now? I looked back at him one last time. This man I'd almost married. This man who'd spent 6 months trying to solve me like I was a balance sheet that didn't balance. Now, I said, now I go home. And tomorrow, I'm changing my phone number. And sometime next week, you'll probably try to figure out what you did wrong. You'll analyze this like it's another corporate restructuring. You'll make lists. You'll identify the moment you miscalculated. I smiled. It felt sad, but here's the thing you'll never understand, Trent. This wasn't a miscalculation. This was always who you are. A man who needs to measure everything, even love. I walked out, got in my car, drove home, and when I got there, when I finally sat down on my couch in my apartment that I'd paid for with money I'd earned myself, surrounded by a life I'd built without anyone's permission or partnership or optimization. Strategy, I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing, feeling something I hadn't felt in 18 months, relief. Because for 30 years, I'd carried my grandmother's account like a burden, like a secret that would destroy any relationship it touched, like proof that I could never fully trust anyone, and maybe that was true. But at least now, I knew at least now I'd stopped pretending that love and audits were compatible. That partnership and investigation could coexist. That a man who spent 6 months trying to inventory my worth would ever see my value. The account would still be there tomorrow. $311,204.19. Money I'd never asked for. Money tied to my grandfather's nightmare and my grandmother's silence and my sister's loss. But it was mine, and for the first time in 30 years, I understood why she'd given it to me. Not as a gift, not as security, as proof that some things are worth protecting even from the people who claim they love you, especially from them. If you stayed until the end, you understand why some secrets are worth keeping. Drop a like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe because there are more stories like mine that need to be told, and I'm just getting started.